Welcome and good afternoon. I'm Karen Merrill, RBH consultant, and I'll be presenting the September webinar on bullying, awareness, and effective response. We've kind of opened it up, but we're going to give everybody another minute or two after the holiday weekend. We're thinking maybe some people are having a slow start, so people are still logging in, and so we'll just wait a minute or so before really diving in to this topic, which is really something that's been much in the news in lots of ways in the last couple of years, and then more specifically lately, both in workplace and then certainly in the schools and then with cyberbullying. So we'll be talking more about that. So my computer says 12. Well, it says 12:02. So we'll get started, and then as people come on, they'll catch up, because the beginning is still kind of some agenda items and introduction. So again, we're presenting bullying awareness and effective response today. So the objectives for the training, we'll talk about bullying at work and at school, statistics and types, warning signs that bullying is occurring, the three sides of bullying, victim, and bystander. And we don't always think about it in terms of that three-pronged triangle. Cyberbullying, a fairly recent phenomena, the effects of bullying, confronting bullying, and then some prevention strategies. As you can see, this is an ambitious agenda, and we've got lots of content. So we'll have the PowerPoint available to you afterwards. So if you have a particular area of interest, you might review them. If we have time at the end, we'll certainly open it up to questions. But because there is a lot of content, I can't guarantee that will be the case, but it may. So we'll take it as it comes. So the next slide, what is bullying? Bullying is aggressive behavior that's intentional, not accidental or done in fun, and that involves an imbalance of power or strength. Often bullying is repeated over time. It can take many forms, such as hitting, punching, teasing, name-calling, intimidation through gestures, social exclusion, and the cyber piece, sending insulting messages or pictures by mobile phone or through the internet. And we'll be kind of detailing those a little later as we move through the program. Bullying includes behavior that intimidates, degrades, offends, or humiliates an individual, often in front of others. Bullying behavior creates feelings of defensiveness in the individual and undermines an individual's right to dignity. Bullying is different from aggression. Whereas aggression may involve a single act, bullying involves repeated attacks against the individual, creating an ongoing pattern of behavior. Interesting to note, tough or demanding bosses are not necessarily bullies as long as their primary motivation is to obtain the best performance by setting high expectations, and that is done across the board and not singling out a specific individual. Next slide, statistics on bullying. Workplace bullying is an epidemic. More than 1 out of every 5 students, or 20.8%, are being bullied. And rates of bullying vary across studies from 9 to 98%. So to make sense of this huge variance, a meta-analysis of 80 studies analyzing bullying involvement rates for 12 to 18 years old reported a mean prevalence of 35% for traditional bullying and 15% for cyberbullying involvement. 37% more than occurs or is reported by students of workers have been bullied, and 54 million people have been bullied at work. More statistics. American employers can and do ignore bullying. 62% of employees that reported being bullied found that their situation worsened or that their employer failed to act on their report. 21 to 28 million workers quit due to bullying each year. And we know that's expensive for workplaces to have to recruit, hire, and retrain. 33% of students who reported being bullied at school indicated that they were bullied at least once or twice a month during the school year. It's no wonder that workers and students are reluctant to report bullying. Some interesting facts. Most bullies are bosses. The stereotype is real. 72% of bullies are bosses. 55 of those bullied are rank and file. Bullying most strongly affects women. Women are targeted by bullies more frequently, 57%, especially by other women. Bullying is a public health hazard. For 45% of bullied targets, stress affects their health. 33% suffer for more than 1 year. And bullied individuals are not sue crazy, which kind of counters what the media sometimes says. Most even fail to complain. Only 3% of bullied targets file lawsuits, and 40% never complain. Bullying behavior. Bullying behavior includes unwarranted or invalid criticism, blame without any factual basis, being treated differently than the rest of your work group, being singled out, or being excluded or forced into social isolation. Those are the beginning kind of aspects of bullying behavior. Next, being shouted or sworn at, or being humiliated, being the target of practical jokes, being watched or excessively monitored. More bullying behavior. Unreasonable expectations. And again, this isn't the tough boss who applies expectations across the board. These are expectations that are singled out to 1 or 2 individuals. Dismissal when these expectations can't be met. Made up complaints, fabricated complaints. And a failure, alleged failure to meet organizational goals. What are the results or signs of bullying? Increased grievances. So that's the small percentage of people that actually do raise a flag or blow a whistle. Increased absenteeism. people not wanting to go to work or be in that environment, increased resignations leaving the organization. And on the other side, those that are targeted get increased disciplinary actions. So these are signs of bullying. Let's look next at the different kinds of bullying. We kind of just touched on it in the beginning, but we have all kinds of categories. Physical, hitting, kicking, pushing, tripping someone, shoving, beating them in an extreme, or, you know, kind of if you can envision two workers coming towards each other where one shoulders the other one. Verbal bullying, name calling, teasing, insulting, gossiping with other coworkers about a targeted individual. Social relational, ignoring, ganging up, leaving someone out and intimidating. And as we look at workplaces and then also look at school settings, you can see how powerful this is for kids who are learning social skills and developing. Cyberbullying, which can go on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Texting, social media targets, email, online embarrassment, blackmail, or threats. And there were, I don't know how long ago, but lots of information on the news some time ago where actual teenage suicides were a result of being targeted with cyberbullying. Sexual bullying, crude comments, sexual assault, inappropriate touching, propositioning, and then at the the most extreme, actually raping. And you can see that some of these kinds of bullying cross over into legal harassment in the workplace kinds of things. So there's laws involved in bullying violations these days. Sexting, sending sexually explicit photos, comments about body parts. Prejudicial, and now, with our heightened orientation around gender diversity and global racial awareness, prejudicial bullying includes demeaning race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. And as we move forward, probably kinds of bullying will increase as our society develops. Next, what does a bully look like? So thinking about really what those characteristics are like. Acting out. Bullies often lose their temper, yelling and screaming at the target. The anxiety caused by this aggressive behavior has been shown to cause mental and physical health issues in targets, and even in those who observe the bullying in the workplace. Name calling. Bullies love to discount the target's work, efforts, and contributions by calling the person names like stupid or teacher's pet. Gossiping. Bullies spread rumors or gossip that inhibit teamwork or the target's credibility. Refusal to work with targets. Instead of working with others, bullies vastly prefer to act against them. The bully may have a group that he or she gets along with, but the bully will never work with the target. So in a certain way, you wonder if the bully isn't threatened in some way by the target. What we call Jekyll and Hyde treatment, The bully engages in intimidation at times when the target is vulnerable and unobserved by others. But when the bully and target are in view of others, especially by a boss, the bully can act kind and cooperative. This situational bad behavior undermines the target's ability to raise concerns about the unseen bully and even question themselves. It makes me think of, kind of gaslighting techniques where you begin to wonder if your own way of seeing it or your emotions are playing tricks on you. So there are a few case studies in the presentation, and this first one relates to a workplace. So Mary just joined a workplace organization. Everything was going well for the first few months. Then her boss started nitpicking every piece of work she did, providing no feedback, just red marking her work, criticizing her writing. Mary was also moved off tasks which fit her skill set to menial jobs which no one else wanted to do. When she tried to request a meeting to discuss this, assert herself, her boss told her that it wasn't her priority. So Mary had a female boss that was bullying her. It continued to get worse. She was repeatedly accused of not doing what was asked of her or making mistakes that she hadn't made. She also discovered her boss was saying nasty things about her behind her back to other staff members. As one would expect, the bullying began to affect her health and her social life. She experienced headaches, nausea, and was so exhausted that she needed to go to bed almost immediately when she got home. It closed off any kind of social support or relief she might get from her non-work environment. It was a long time before Mary connected the frequency of these feelings to the things she was experiencing at work. And if we were in the room together, I'd ask, what do you think Mary did? My guess is Mary left this organization and tried to find an organization that did a better job at supporting staff. So the next slide. Warning signs that a student is being bullied. Unexplained injuries, refusals to go to school, frequent stomach aches, headaches, excuses, depression as seen by not eating well or having disturbed sleep or sleeping too much, loss of friends, lost or stolen items, fearful but does not want to discuss their fears, and avoiding social situations and interactions. Now, there have always been workplace bullies. 20, 30, 40 years ago, they were workplace bullies. But today, it's gotten worse. And certainly with, COVID and virtual learning and the increase in cyberbullying, there are many more ways that students can get bullied. So the next slide. What does a bully look like? What are these characteristics? Behave in a dominant way. Behaves as if they feel superior. Quick-tempered. Impulsive. Takes pleasure in seeing others' distress. Insensitive to others' feelings. Opinionated. Closed-minded. Not able to put themselves in other people's shoes. Refuses to take responsibility. Blames others, especially the target. And no empathy, really, nothing on an empathy scale. Intolerant of differences among people that they might interact with. So let's look next about characteristics of a target victim. These folks are easy to target because of low self-esteem and low self-confidence, limited sense of humor, being submissive, not asserting themselves generally, anxious, fearful, sad in appearance, probably not, sure about the way they interact in any environment, depressive, few or no friends, poor social skills, excessive dependence on adults. We'll see that that targets that are young people, kids, oftentimes are much more comfortable with adults than with other kids. Have some kind of difference in physical or cultural characteristics that makes them stand out and not be able to blend in to a crowd. So they may get more attention generally. But this is important, I think. And in a certain way, they're envied by the bully, and the bully is wanting dominance over them. So the bully, in fact, is a very insecure, damaged kind of personality that finds those that they can dominate. So the next case study in the next slide is of a new student. Henry was a shy sixth grader who recently arrived at school from out of state. That's always hard. Even I remember when I was in school and somebody would come in midterm, it was always hard for them to integrate into a group. One day, as he was browsing a social media site, he came across a page about the school that he attended with pictures of students, including himself, labeled the fat nerd. Upset? He posted a reply expressing his dismay, which was a brave thing to do. The postings became nastier, and soon some students were making loud comments in the lunchroom and on the playground. A teacher overheard some of the names he was being called and asked Henry what was going on. Fortunately, he described the social media page and the cyberbullying, and hopefully we can hope that that teacher took action so that Henry got some support. So on the next slide, let's look at kind of victim versus bully. Bullies' friendship circles are limited, and friends only serve a purpose for them. They're selfish individuals. Victims relate well to adults, are compliant in relationship with adults and peers, and may be timid. They don't want to do anything that would make them stand out. Bullies do tend to be isolated, even though it doesn't look like it, with limited relationships. With victims, out of fear, relationships may be more superficial, and they can be depressed individuals. With a bully, power is perceived as achievement and will target others to obtain that power, makes them feel safe. Victims can have a small circle of friends, but still feel isolated. With bullies, again, there's a lack of empathy. Victims have empathy, partially from their own experience, but often lack self-confidence. Bullies use harmful actions to obtain dominance over others, and victims, due to their experience with bullies, have empathy towards others. Oftentimes, when we experience something ourselves, then we can see that in others and are more empathetic of what they're experiencing. So the next slide, we'll look at bystanders. We don't oftentimes think about bystanders as being so important. But when you think back on kind of schoolyard and school place environments, I think about those bystanders and the roles they play. Bullies like an audience. Bullies can instigate, prod, and encourage bullies, makes them feel like they're a part of a group. They can even cheer, making comments to further stimulate the bully. They can join in with the bully and passively encouraging bullying by watching. They can do nothing to dissuade the bully or even take action. Social groups are very, very powerful. And really starting in school as teenagers and young adults and then in workplaces. Social groups have a lot of power. So the next slide, we look at kind of 24-hour, 7-day-a-week distress. Traditional bullying usually stops at school. But cyberbullying, again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year, that is impossible to hide from, and that often exposes the victim's vulnerability to everyone in their social media network, ultimately causing hopelessness and concern regarding possible depression and even suicide. And now I often wonder how the pandemic and virtual learning has impacted the concept of cyberbullying when there is so much internet activity. It can make that be on the rise. So, cyberbullying facts. 81% of teens believe online bullying is easier to get away with, which causes them to dismiss thoughts of consequences, which makes perfect sense. 43% of adolescents have been bullied online. And for 25% of them, it's happened more than once. 90% of teens who were witness to cyberbullying have ignored it. In other words, logging onto sites, seeing bullying behavior, but standing back. A mere 10% of victims inform parents of the abuse. And 75% of teens admit to having visited a website bashing a peer. Cyberbullying victims are 2 to 9 times more likely to consider suicide. There's something about the being able to do it in isolation that keeps people from realizing the consequences. Cyberbullying, because it's virtual and hidden, creates a syndrome for the victim or target of fear, shame, anxiety, which can lead more to depression or suicide. So a red flag, as a parent, as an educator, to sit down with kids and bring forward the concept of cyberbullying in general and bullying as well, and that you're available and give a message of open communication and support and reminding of them of this. Everybody gets caught up and busy, but this is serious stuff that really has some public health consequences. So the next slide, another case study in terms of texting. Gina was an exuberant and high-spirited high school freshman. She had a falling out with a girlfriend over a boy they both liked at school. Not surprising. It wasn't long before Gina began getting rude text messages to her phone at all hours, calling her names and saying inappropriate things, such as, "I hope you die soon." The angry friend had enlisted others to text hateful remarks to Gina too. Gina, of course, was devastated and not reaching out for help because of fearing her own contribution to this, soon began to withdraw from her friends and her active social life. She spent more and more time alone in her room. Her mom grew concerned when Gina would no longer talk about what was going on at school or in her life. So she reached out to one of Gina's closest friends and learned about the hateful texts her daughter was receiving. So Gina's mom was kind of on the alert and certainly charted and realized these changes in her behavior, and then reached out to a friend to kind of do some investigation to see what was going on. And it gave her some power to be able to support her daughter. So next, the effects of bullying. Hard to concentrate. You know, if we've got a lot of stuff going on, we get kind of what I call flooded, where, you know, the psychic energy is getting thinned out, diluted so much. It's hard to focus. Loss of sleep, worrying, stress, irritability, mood swings, up and down, outbursts of anger, feeling anxiety, having panic attacks, crying episodes, and a lost sense of humor, really an inability of seeing joy in many things. So these are just some of the effects of bullying, and now we'll look at even more in the next slide. Not being able to kind of change the channel from obsessive thinking about that bully, having nightmares about them, having that, you know, entering your unconscious, anticipating the next attack. Shame is a very, very common symptom of being bullied. There's, you know, we blame ourselves, we take responsibility, and feel shame. Clinical depression, guilt, tending towards substance abuse as a way of self-medicating, or food, or any other, you know, kind of maladaptive coping mechanism, just to try to numb ourselves from what's happening. Suicidal thoughts, even plans of suicide. We can, the one being bullied can become violent themselves, towards themselves, or in some cases others. Although it's not, retaliation is not generally something that happens with a target. What are the longer term effects? What do those look like? Depression and anxiety throughout life. Social anxiety and agoraphobia are common issues, you know, that isolation and not wanting to leave the house. And now, with our limited social interaction outside the house, there's even more vulnerability for that. Naturally, our own sense of self and self-esteem will reduce. Losing trust, questioning ourselves, questioning others, difficulty forming close relationships throughout life. Health problems, particularly those related to sleeping and eating. And again, increased propensity for suicide. So when you think about it, those targeted early in life can carry these things into adult life. So for families, workplaces, and schools, the importance of a message of a culture of acceptance, open communication, and support, and talking about bullying and talking about cyberbullying, so that it isn't hidden, that it's in our language, so that we can feel more comfortable about raising those issues. Confronting bullies. This is tricky, particularly when part of what happens to being bullied is that you feel diminished and you feel much less empowerment to come forward. But thinking about discussing it rather than confronting it, being specific, whether or not you're in a workplace or in a school setting, documenting with detail and getting the message out about documenting all experiences so that you have tangible things to point to instead of theorizing. Paying attention and watching what's going on. And if you're on the side of management or investigating incidents, not prejudging, not making blanket kinds of determinations, but investigating individually and interviewing individually. Not reacting emotion with emotion. And this is on both sides. We can, on a management level or HR level, be so outraged by the episode or the story that we can react with emotion. So trying to be as objective as possible is something to remember. So next, confronting bullies. In terms of in a leadership capacity, in a communication capacity, stressing the consequences of actions, holding bystanders accountable, bringing up the importance that they play a role in this kind of three-party system, intervening or calling for help, constantly reminding groups of people that they have a means of being able to do that, and an ear that will be available. Educating the bully in terms of what their behavior is perceived as in the beginning of incidences, and encouraging good behavior with praise and feedback. So next, thinking about repairing relationships. So, it's all so ominous, and there's so many consequences that, it can make us feel like just throwing our hands up and not wanting to really take action. But, thinking even if our colleagues might see ourselves as showing some bullying behavior, recognizing and taking responsibility, trying to make amends and reestablish positive workplace relationships. Of course, this is easier said than done. An executive named Edmonds, who's a founder and CEO of an organization called Purposeful Culture, acknowledges and tells us that bullying behavior erodes trust and respect between the bully and the target. To make amends and to repair this requires sustained, consistent effort by the bully to regain the lost trust and respect. It also requires a lot of ownership and in my view, probably counseling for the bully to be able to tolerate this shift. Too frequently, a bully is unable to resist the temptation to bully again. If amends are to be attempted, Edmonds advises taking 3 steps with coworkers. Recognize and take responsibility for actions. This means admitting to former bad behavior willingly and openly to everyone affected by bullying behavior. The apology may not be accepted at first because so much damage having been done. But as a bully, you must continue down that path to attempt to make amends. Hold feedback sessions with your boss. check-ins around how things are going on the track for improvement. A supervisor can help gather perceptions from teammates, past targets, internal customers, and even external customers to gain accurate insight into current behavior. Point 3, seeking external help. Engaging with a professional coach to examine why you may have been using bullying tactics in the first place. As a bully, looking at root causes of your bullying behavior might help disengage from such behavior in the future. And also, a bully can't be a very happy, self-satisfied human being. So seeking help and repairing behavior and characteristics can really improve everyone in the future. So because school bullying is so prevalent, our next few slides are going to kind of look at prevention strategies in schools. But as we go over them, think kind of creatively around how we can use these policies in workplaces as well, and also how we can use them creatively virtually until we're able to kind of be in spaces together. Teach communication skills. Part of a K-12 curriculum should be a training module on positive communication skills and self-awareness. Students should be taught to identify bullying language, both in themselves and in their peers. And this should include verbal and nonverbal, via body language and social media and internet. A reporting procedure, a clear-cut procedure for students and parents to report needs to be established. Reporters should have the option of being anonymous, and a school counselor or social worker to be available to meet with students who report bullying and to determine a solution. And these reporting procedures can also be convertible to workplaces as well. More prevention strategies. Counseling. Counseling that incorporates role playing should be available for victims, bystanders, and bullies alike. Alliances in a professional community outside school should be made for students who require ongoing therapy as a result. Peer-to-peer support is important. Engage students in peer-to-peer counsel, helping bystanders to become upstanders. Continue a school-wide assembly as possible. Remind students that when a peer bystander intervenes, the bullying stops within 10 seconds. That's according to a study at UC Davis. And it would be true in workplaces as well. So the more bystanders get educated, the less bullying we'll see as we move forward. The next slide. Clear policies and stern sanctions. Make sure policies are clear. Post policies in places where students and parents alike can see them. Send the policy home via email or paper quarterly. Make it clear that bullying is now an illegal offense and there is zero tolerance for bullying or exclusionary behavior. It's interesting, bullying and cyberbullying in terms of the legal aspect varies by state. And there are sites that point out where you can click on a state and it'll show what those laws look like state by state. When a complaint is lodged, make a thorough investigation and engage the parents if possible. This is also true in workplaces in terms of how HR needs to handle it. Work with parents' organizations to feature speakers on a bullying topic. Children who bully often learn that tactic at home. So education needs to be widespread. Consider instituting a peer-to-peer support system. And then our last prevention strategy for schools. In the next slide. Activities and assemblies. School-wide events that highlight the negative aspects of bullying should be held on a regular basis. That, again, could be assemblies with speakers, even formerly bullied young adults, kind of recovering bullies, and what they might be able to share. Law enforcement officers, poster contests, essay contests, winners that read their essay, or in a virtual way. What we call a kindness contest, where students spend a week offering kindnesses to each other. And at the end of the week, recorded kindnesses are counted and winners are announced. More activities can be found on a site called the National Bullying Prevention Center. But you can see that the purpose for these strategies is bringing it out in the open. The more we address it, the more we talk about it, the less protection a bully feels like they may have, and the more support a target or victim may feel, and more support in being able to have a voice in coming forward. So it does look like we've got a few minutes at the end of our presentation today. And if anybody has any questions, you can type those in kind of the question box, the chat box, and I'd be happy to address anything that you may have in these last couple of minutes that I may be able to do. There's a lot of information here, and I think that most of us realize with the situation we're in terms of limited contact and support, these things are more challenging to deal with, but probably even more important as a result. Brenda, do you see any questions?
Oh, hi, Karen. Yeah, I'm just opening the questions panel.
Okay.
And I want to remind everyone that if you do post a question, it is completely confidential and anonymous. So no one will know that you've posted a question or what the question is. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. That's important.
Okay, so here's our first question.
Okay.
If someone is experiencing what they believe is bullying from a supervisor, how should they go about addressing it?
So if you're comfortable addressing it with the supervisor by stating that there are certain things that are being communicated that make you feel blankety blank, whatever that is, and that it would be helpful, and if that supervisor would acknowledge that, and you give them clues about how you would like to be communicated with, and give that message. So in other words, saying, I feel like when we talk that what I am saying is judged, or I feel such and such, and I'd appreciate it if I were able to state my opinions more openly. If that's not possible, and sometimes it isn't, I mean, sometimes you feel so intimidated or powerless in that setting, then I'd go to HR. I would take the concern to human resources, and because that's their job, and that's what they're there for. And hopefully procedures are in place in HR to address it. So I'd say, on the first count, if something could be communicated directly, if that feels comfortable, and if not, then I would take it to human resources. It's a very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Karen. We do have a few more questions here. How do you assist a child when their parent is bullying them?
So if that knowledge is gained in a school setting or childcare setting, or however that information is, however you get that information, I'd reach out to the parent if at all possible. And if you're an educator, I'd look to what the school procedure might be, or the school counseling department, the school counselors might offer. It would seem to me that that's going to take, a collaboration with the parent, and then maybe the parent and child. But that's going to require giving feedback back to the parent. And hopefully, maybe the parent is not even aware that their style is bullying their child. But you can say that however you're exposed to the student, and you're seeing such and such, that you want to just observe, share your observations, that there's behavior that the child may feel like they're being bullied by that communication style. It's a hard spot. These are not easy places to be, but it's so important to reach out in any way we can to relieve the distress, because it can be so serious. Thank you.
Okay. So how do you address bullying when it's your boss and you have to coach them on it?
So if they're willing, I mean, if they're willing to take the coaching, I would give them feedback about how their behavior results in, and then as specifically as you can be in terms of how it does impact you or the work group, or whatever. If you feel as if that puts you in a very uncomfortable position, you might even say to the supervisor that I wonder if, as your employee, that really isn't my role, and what they think about reaching out to their supervisor or HR, because it really isn't your job. It's, if they're willing to hear it, it's your job to give them feedback if they're willing to hear it, and it doesn't, end up coming back to haunt you. But in terms of coaching them so they become better communicators, then they need to go elsewhere. They need to see an EAP counselor, or go to their boss, or go to HR for more guidance. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Sure.
A couple more questions here. Some workplace bullies can be star performers, making it difficult to speak up about their bullying behavior. What would be options to deal with this type of situation?
I would ask HR what the policies are around reporting. And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. They can be star performers. So, and it can be that Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, where among certain groups they're seen one way, and among other groups they're seen in a very different light, or where where you're targeted. So, I'd go to your supervisor or HR, or if the bully is your supervisor, then again, if feedback can be given, or if you need to go to HR, I would do that. It would seem to me that in today's world, I mean, this is not, this isn't a secret that these things are a problem, that policies are in place in terms of whether there's, a anonymous hotline, or you can be assured confidentiality through HR, and they have their own, they have to be accountable around that, where they allow confidentiality for you as an employee sharing information. Thank you for the question.
So it looks like those are all the questions we have for this afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for attending and engaging and opening up to ask your questions. And I wish I had, a rule book with all really clear answers for how to react and what to do. But I think we have to find ways of opening the dialogue in avenues that feel safe enough to do so, and not hold on to it because it's hard. And the EAP is always available to you in terms of talking with a counselor. So remember that you've got that wonderful benefit. So we'll close, and I want to thank you all again, particularly the day after a long weekend, and hope for you a good rest of your day and this rest of your short week. Thank you. Bye.